Today we're going to speak about boring sex. We're also going to speak about an 1850 book called The Scarlet Letter. And when I was reading it, and Claude and I had to read it in 10th grade because we were both of that era, he said to me, Hester Prynne did not sin. And I thought, that's fabulous. Remember this, okay? Let that be something that informs you. Hester Prynne did not sin. Now, what happened in this book, The Scarlet Letter, and I often have to teach by showing books because it's a way for me to address taboo subjects as a book club. So go ahead and read The Scarlet Letter because you're going to see that Pearl was the child of an erotic love story in which the two people were very focused and loved each other completely and monogamously. And the woman had a previous partner, this old Roger Chillingworth, or whatever his name was, who was a decrepit old man. And she wanted nothing to do with him. So when she came to Massachusetts, she had a red-hot sexual relationship with a minister, which was forbidden, and she had to wear the Scarlet Letter. But what's interesting about this book, and please do read it, from 1850, the language was really different, right? And even when I was in school in the 80s, we were adept with a lot more vocabulary than current people have. Like my last video where the woman commented on my information about the secret soldier program of the tech billionaire that I must be hoofing roach spray because, and I don't even know what that means, but that's the vocabulary of what has happened to humanity. So if you read this, that was the vocabulary that I was raised on, a 1850 classic. Now the child Pearl is wild. She's feral. She's out there in nature. She's putting flowers in her hair. She's putting leaf adornments on her body. She even makes an A for adulterer, Scarlet Letter, on her little chest with various things from the forest. And she's always playing in the forest. And when other people are pointing the finger at her mother, Hester Prynne, Pearl fights back. She's feral. She's ferocious. That is an example of what humanity is supposed to be. We are not supposed to be these lesser wives, these Eves, who are afraid of sinning. Oh my gosh, I had an erotic thought. So I need to also bring this into astrology, which I would say that all of the rest of the astrology out there is wrong, is New Age baloney, okay? But the astrology that I learned from the Hellenistic texts, or actually scrolls from the Library of Alexandria, that my teacher came through, was the real astrology, okay? And in that astrology, you'd have to study for 10 years. So if you are getting a session with an astrologer who has not studied for 10 years, then you are not really getting astrology, okay? But what I have seen, and I can see in all charts, is the conception. And I know from my own children and from my study of my mother and my father, the conception is in the chart with the personal names of the parents also, unless your father or your mother was fantasizing about somebody else. One example that I have is a couple. The man was having an affair, and the name of that person is prominent in the chart because he was probably fantasizing about that person. So that is where, some people will say, well, my mother's name and my father's name are in the chart. The mother's name is conjunct the moon, the father's name is conjunct Saturn, but my sister's not like that. And that is likely because by the time your sister came along, your parents weren't even in love anymore. And they might have been fantasizing about somebody else. Like your mom might have been reading Harlequin romances and thinking about like some Texan stud millionaire who is her fantasy, and she's thinking about him, and that name will be in the chart. And your father will be thinking about football, like Claude overheard. He was picking up a package yesterday, and he overheard these two men having like a really passionate, like almost like life-changing conversation. And it was about some football player who was not going to perform in the Stupid Bowl on February 8th. And he was out for the season. So that man, you know, he'll be like all his passion about like that football player and his name. And so in your chart will be the name of that football player. And that's why sometimes you will not find your parents' names in the chart, or your own name, which is very interesting. So my name of what it was is different in my two daughters' charts. So my first daughter, my name was different, and that name is conjunct her sun. My second daughter, I had changed my name, so that name is not prominent in her chart. So it's also like that, and both of my daughters have changed their names from their birth names. So, you know, a lot of interesting things like that. The other thing I must say about astrology before I get into this boring sex topic is that folks still don't really understand astrology. I'm not predicting anything. Usually when I'm reading your astrology, I'm looking back at events that have happened 60 years ago. And one of them was a true crime documentary. A mother, and the mother's name is there, and the grandfather, who was a pedophile who had raped little girls and buried them. And the names are there. And what happened was those names were coming through for this client's chart. But this is something that happened like 40 years ago. So don't think that because I'm focusing on it, I'm manifesting it. No, that's not what I do when I'm an astrologer. I'm doing like retroactive investigative work. All right. Now, I've told you I've been using the Dr. Cam Yun method to delete the fetal patterns in my own chart, which is why a lot more insight is coming through, because I am reverse spinning. So that's doing it by itself, by my intention. I'm reverse spinning right now and clearing fetal patterns. And what I actually do is clear the entire astrology chart. But you have to know what it is to do it, okay? And that's why when Glendy showed me this, you know, how to use the drawn chart and then clear the conception, the fetal patterns, all of your mother's trauma, and all the horrible stories and archetypes that are in the asteroid belt from the broken planet of Tiamat. So that's what I do. I am reverse spinning, deleting, eliminating, setting free, bringing back to neutral, releasing and resolving any causality event from the fetal patterns. And I'm doing it again right now. And you can do it too on your chart, okay? And so it has really helped me to get all the resentment and terrible stuff that was from the fetal imprints in my chart, but also the conception. But my father's name, Richard, is absolutely conjunct my Saturn. And when he died, his name was prominent also, and the configuration was there. And all of those are in my old astrology videos prior to 2020. In 2020, I had to start going into the demiurge structures because I had to understand what is going on here and the overlays. And the overlays were both Masonic and Judeo-Christianity, the Abrahamic religions and the Freemasons. So I had to understand, I had to go into some very dark stuff, his dark materials, okay, to understand that the angels were actually demons and everything. So for 5 years, you've heard a lot of really crappy stuff from me. But Satan and Lucifer are who the Freemasons think are God, and Jehovah and Yahweh are who the Judeo-Christian All the Abrahamic religions, have some other, they're all the same being. Okay, it's Satan, all of them. And of course, it's just an interdimensional invader from Mars, but I understand that this goes on throughout the galaxy, that this being and Metatron, the lesser Yahweh, are in cahoots all over the galaxy. So you got to figure it out here. So I also encourage you to really study and understand what is going on here. So now back to the boring sex. So say that and I wrote a community post and also one on my Facebook page, say that your parents, your mom just laid down in missionary position, which apparently is not sinful, and she took it, whatever he needed to ejaculate into her in the next 30 seconds. And it's over. She didn't even have an orgasm. So I think that is why people do not have personal volition, they don't have willpower, and they do not have intent. Because your parents did not have intent in creating you. Your mother basically took it. Okay? So that was that generation. I mean, we've made generations and generations since the 1850s of people who just laid down in missionary pose. Women never had an orgasm. And that's why they invented dildos, because there were actually doctors who would give women an orgasm because they never had an orgasm and they were suffering terribly from basically not being able to move their kundalini and not have any volition of their own, but having to give all of their creative power to the man because his sperm stays in you for 7 years. And in fact, if you've had multiple partners, it's all in there creating your current child. So if you've had sex with many different people, all of that DNA, all of those feelings, all of that trauma is in there creating your current child. And I studied that from Psychology Today when they're trying to understand the new genetic testing and parentage and child support for someone that they can't even figure out who the father is because there's so many different semen, subliminal fluids that are still up in there for 7 years. So, I mean, monogamy is the only way to do it, folks. So I also want to say that. Now, I have so many things in my mind of trying to explain this all to you, but if your parents were watching football, porn, or your mother was reading Harlequin romances, you probably came in without any intent, self-will, or volition. Your mom may have been in a state of self-pity where she was like, oh, another child, how am I going to do this? Oh my gosh. So she was living like that. So people often don't have volition, and then they want to get it from me. And this is what I also notice. These are my tinctures. I've never made these tinctures before. I have never made a black walnut tincture before, but I've made reishi mushroom tinctures and chaga tinctures and all kinds of tinctures in my life. So it was very easy, and it's almost a no-brainer for me to know how to take green walnuts, chop them up, and put them in vodka. It's not hard. But that's because I have released and resolved all of those conception and fetal imprints and trauma that is multi-generational in my womb. And that's what I've been doing for years. So for me, people say they want to study with me, they want to find out what's happening next. And I'm going, you are creating this reality. You are literally making this up all the time. And that's where I talked about the void and these luminous strands that come out of me, and they create reality. They literally do. So I create black walnut tincture because I'm walking along and there's tons of green walnuts on the tree, and I start putting them in every bag that I have in the car. And people say, well, how do you do that, Lolita? I want to study with you. I'm like, you can't study with me because I just happen to be driving through Staunton, Virginia. You can't study that with me. There's no way. What you need to do is get back your own energy and your own volition from your fetal patterns. and probably your demonic conception. They had no intent, no erotic spark. And so your spark is very, very low. Like you don't have a lot of life force. Don Juan in the Carlos Castaneda books talked about boring sex all the time, and that a bunch of his students could not even have sex because they didn't have enough life energy to have sex. Whereas he would point out, like, I don't know whether it was Julian or one of the Nagals, he was like, you see that guy and why he's so supernatural and he can walk straight up a wall and then walk across the ceiling and down the other wall? That's because his parents had really hot sex. So that's what I want you to know. It's really, the astrology chart is your conception chart. That's what it is. And whether your parents were, thinking about somebody else, the marriage counselor, while they had sex with you, or some football player that they're very passionate about, or they had sex with you the night of the Super Bowl, the Stupid Bowl, and watched the satanic halftime show and got turned on by the satanic music, and then had sex with you. That night also is the highest level of domestic violence and death of women in the entire year, is the night of the Super Bowl, February 8th. So just be aware of that is happening this year. So if you want to get your own volition, it's not in the astrology. You need to actually reverse spin and get rid of the astrology. And like marmalade, like I've never made marmalade before. And people are like, oh, I want to find out how to do it. I want to study with you, Lilita. I'm like, well, I walked by Sandy's house, saw that her tree was full of unbelievable oranges. Claude and I carried a ladder over. I carried a box. He threw oranges at me. I threw them in the box. We took them home, put them in a pot, boiled them for a few minutes with salt water, and then cut them up and then made them into marmalade, which you don't need me to teach you. What you need is your own volition, your own willpower, your own intent. When you have intent, when you have fire in you, when you are a divine spark of creation, you can create anything. You can manifest this house, which I did. And I told you some of the stories how I did it, because I drew it. I visualized it. I wanted big windows. I wanted end of the road cul-de-sac. I wanted a completely fenced property. And I would not settle for less, because I told you, I do not compromise. Because I have intent. I have willpower. I have fire. I will do things. I make things. I'm extremely creative. Okay, now, with my own daughters, my name is conjunct my first daughter's son, because my intent was very, very strong in loving her and choosing to bring her in. Her father, however, and I'm going to be candid about this because we need to get into some of these taboo subjects. Her father was what I would consider a very confused pervert. And so her father was in love with a man that he was working with at the time. And we were basically on the verge of divorce, and we decided to go camping and do the Adirondack Trail, which is what generally brought us together. Was he was athletic and I was athletic. And we had sex in a tent. And I was in love with nature, and that we were out in nature, and that we were going to go for a hike later, and I felt myself ovulate, and I knew that that soul came through. And I can tell you that that daughter, and I need to be private with what, she's a psychologist. So she has her master's degree in psychology. She has a very different perspective in helping people than I do. She counsels for allowing people to use chemicals to alter themselves. And I'm not going to discredit her, but that is the way she got that way, was because her father had a lot of problems and still does, as far as I know. But I don't want you to, any of you, think that you should approach any of my daughters. Remember, I am like the fiendess. If you step over my boundaries, And I tell my daughters to be the same way, and they've had to change their names because some of you will find my daughters and want to talk to my daughters about me. Let me tell you, my intent is not just making marmalade and black walnut tinctures. I have a lot of fire in me, a lot of power. So don't cross me. And I don't know how to say that more clearly. I still end up blocking and deleting someone just about every day because they're not listening. They're literally trying to get me, to taunt me, and I won't have it. All right. So, and then my second daughter, look at your conception of your children and what was happening. My second daughter was with a different man, okay? And I had already left that first man who just could not straighten himself out, and I couldn't straighten him out. So I got to tell you, they're not all going to be willing to be straightened out. So in my last video about the parasite cleanse, I said, the man has to be willing to get out of his perversion. If not, you need to get out of there. And I did. And it was dangerous. All right. I had a restraining order. It was very dangerous, and it was a big, horrible court process, but I did it. And that's some of the thing that you all think that I just lived this perfect life and I haven't been divorced before and didn't have to have like lawyers and police officers and restraining orders involved. I did. And I did it because that was the right thing to do. All right. Now with my second child, it was a good man. He was a very good man, much older than me. At that point, I think I was looking for like a father figure to like keep me safe, and he was a good man. And he was with Neem Karoli Baba, and he told me a lot of wonderful stories about Neem Karoli Baba was like a Nagul, also like Don Juan. He could like bilocate, he could slip through a crack, you could lock him in a room and he would be outside of the room. He would be in Kenchi and Vrindavan at the same time, so he was very like Don Juan. All right. So I had a lot of like firsthand stories, and people have also said, Don Juan couldn't be real because there's no video evidence of the things that he was able to do. I'm like, you guys, that was 1962. There were no videos. Like, people weren't carrying around their cell phone making videos of Don Juan bilocate. I mean, come on. And the same with Neem Karoli Baba. But there were many stories and books written. And my second husband collected those stories. His name is Kabir Das. And he's a good man. For him, when we conceived my second child, she was in the room and I felt her soul before we conceived her. So I talked to her. And she was very, yeah, that's that girl. I love her so much. She's so unique. She's so wild. She does not behave in any way. She quit school. She's my wild child. And she came through a night after we had been boiling maple syrup, and I had been drinking maple syrup. So like utter rascal sweetness of a pure rascal. That's my second child. So you see, literally, we are stargates. We women are stargates. And whatever you're feeling, whatever you're focusing on, what is your intent when you bring that child through? Okay? And many people come through very traumatized wombs. So I'm going to speak without naming names of client sessions that I've had recently of a wonderful woman who has her spark and has her volition, but she had to realize and make conscious and then delete, neutralize, eliminate, counterspin, bring back to 0 point, her volition, because her mother was gang raped by 5 men, and then her father was a police officer who beat and drugged and raped her mother. So she came through that kind of traumatized womb. But, when you realize it, when you recognize it, when you talk to your parents about what was going on in their hearts, in their minds, were they well cared for? Did they have like a really profound intent when creating you? Was it beautiful? Were they monogamous? Were they thinking about the other person and saying their name? And then that name will show up in the chart in the way that it was in the conception. And if it isn't there, then your parents were probably thinking about somebody else, or somebody in a book or somebody on TV. And just think about the level of internal dialogue that we are all, like, everyone's now on Facebook going on about what happened at Davos and all what Aurora calls the fat asses in Davos, and they're all putting up pictures of Donald Trump. And I'm like, you're all thinking about Donald Trump, and then you have sex, you're going to have a Donald Trump baby. And I've seen those charts, and I'm looking at this chart, I'm like, this chart is like Donald Trump child. And it's because people are reflecting on his consciousness and then having sex. So that's your intent. That becomes your volition. I'm like, I'm not going to go there right now. Okay, but I know what his parents were like because I've read the biographies about him. And I know what went on with his oldest brother, who suddenly died or was sacrificed because the daughter of that man wrote a book about that. All right. So you're looking at and you're tuning into, you're resonating with these absolute perverts that you shouldn't even be looking at. And then you go and have sex with somebody and you're thinking about how either happy or angry you are with Donald Trump. You're making Donald Trump babies with your boring sex act. You have no intent or focus within you. In fact, you're having sex with Donald Trump. The other weird thing that I have heard is the mind control dreams, both from men and from women. Women tend to have like Elon Musk come into their dream and try and kiss them or say that he wants to have babies with them. I've heard that a lot. So that's definitely like voice to skull, whatever they use with that dream stuff. The other thing I've heard from men, mostly men that have been in the military, that they have dreams of a red dragon, like a red reptilian, which is Satan. That's Satan. And he has a forked penis, and he's trying to have anal sex with you. So that's what I've heard from a lot of men. And they're heterosexual, but they've got that dream thing coming into them from Satan. So just, you can let go of your perversions like that. That's not actually you. And that's why I no longer believe in anything that Carl Jung had to say about the collective unconscious, because now I know that was all technology. That was all demon level AI technology that you just didn't even realize was being used on you through military applications. So that's what that is. So for the men out there that have those kind of dreams, reverse spin on that. You can literally do like a clearing on yourself like this. Clear, 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 clear these perturbations. Or you can reverse spin, clear that thought pattern. That was not mine. That is not me. To be your true self. So one very kind and honest person in my last video commented that he just gives up. He's a pervert, that no amount of changing his diet, cleaning out his parasites, or, reading the books help him. But that's right now they're doing a lot of mind control. And it comes through radio music. It comes from TV. It comes from the internet. It comes from broadcasting signals through cell towers and satellites too. So just recognize, I don't want you to feel bad about yourself and give up on yourself. So that's why I'm making this video for you. I got my volition by realizing my natal name was conjunct my grandmother's Persephone and my mother's Proserpina. And they brought through me that I have Persephone and Proserpina, both in the first house, of a girl who was terribly abducted by my stepfather. Unbelievable shit went down, which I've already discussed before, and I don't even think about it anymore because I got that all out of me. But I'm trying to tell you how to get it out of you. That's not you. That's why the whole Carl Jung stuff is not applicable either. That is not your shadow. That is not your shadow. That is probably a technology that's being beamed into your head. Or you watched a football game, which has all the subliminal acoustic manipulation of penetrating the rear line. folks. And then you've got Tracy Twyman's work, and she was really thorough with this work about the Knights Templar and the Freemasons, and she used the Ouija board to even channel Satan because she wasn't sure who God was, because she as confused as all of us have been. Is it Jehovah and Yahweh? Is it Lucifer and Satan? They're all the same, of course. And that's the duality template, is this one's pretending to be good and this one's pretending to be evil. But these people think that one's good and these people think that one's evil. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the same being. Did you not figure that out yet? Okay. So Tracy Twyman really explained how the elites did it. The elites do this by summoning the planets, doing perverse acts through orgies and the use of a lot of weird drugs to make everybody super horny, and then a lot of anal sex, and then they create the holy child. So that's your world leaders. So that's Justin Trudeau. I mean, who is that not? You all know that now. So why are you watching the people from Davos? Why are you even looking at them? And then thinking that that one's your hero and that one's your antichrist. They're all created by extremely perverse sex. And they have a lot of power because the way they did those orgies and the way they do that, and I know from, Elon Musk's mother was a Charles Manson girl. Her name was Light back then. And I know from the nanny, who was the nanny in that household in California, that they did all of those same rituals. Kind of like my BitChute video about, it's only on BitChute, I could never get this one. But that weird Rosemary's Baby stuff, that's what they were doing. So the Rosemary Baby stuff is what Tracy Twyman, because she was a super psychic, was able to use her powers to see into some of these rituals. I don't know if she was actually part of them or she was just a seer, like complete, almost like a remote viewer who can go into the situation and be there for it. It's like someone who can go to Congress and know what Bernie Sanders is whispering to someone else because they can remote view through that ability to basically bilocate. And Don Juan had that, and the Nagal Julian, and several different of the Carlos Castaneda 1960s, all the way back to the 1800s, of the indigenous Mexican people who kept that oral tradition alive. That's why there's no videos of it, people. It was an oral tradition, and an anthropologist reported on it. Okay, so if you want to create something, the first thing is you don't go to an astrologer. You determine what your intent is. So people have been coming to me and saying, well, what's my year ahead look like? And I'm always like, well, you can use Uranus this way. Saturn and Neptune will make a conjunction on this day. You might want to, use your visualization to make things into reality. That's a Saturn and Neptune situation. But you don't have to know that. I mean, that's not going to do it for you. Like Saturn and Neptune are not going to make a black walnut tincture. I have to do that. The planets are really honestly irrelevant. Truly, they are irrelevant. But if you want to reverse spin those fetal patterns and get rid of your astrology chart, you can, all right? And I think it's important to do that and know what all those elements are, particularly like with Nessus conjunct the ascendant, and you continually allowing your psyche to be raped by dependency on something that's never going to happen. So just know that it's possible. Where we are now, we're going to get a clean slate. So if you've listened to Aurora's latest video, and this was said by Ashana Dean and many people, that over 90% of the people here are kind of filler people. They're filler people from boring sex. And that's what Don Juan called the common man, and why he could only find like 15 people for his warrior party, which is how many people I had their retreat too. Like 15 powerful, good souls who can do it, right? And they can actually show up, and they actually have magical intent, and they actually can get there, And they are wild and feral people. So it was hard. I have like 6,000 people watching some of my videos, and 15 of them actually had enough magical intent to show up. About half of them made reservations and then canceled their reservation. And they had various reasons, so I'm not gonna, get into that, because they had to do things that they needed to do. But that's kind of like what Don Juan said. The common man, he doesn't have that luminous bubble around, which is your soul. That's what your soul is. So we were calling them, I was calling them non-source players. A lot of people were calling them non-player characters, but they do actually have souls. It's just that it's not a real like spark. It's like a kind of incoherent, boring sex person that are always on the front page of the paper for like petty crime, petty tyrants, people who are sex abusers. They're nonstop. I follow the sheriff's page. So the sheriff is posting, pedophiles and people locking children in their apartment, human trafficking nonstop here in Florida. And petty tyrants who just steal like your Amazon delivery, at your mailbox. But this is like nonstop. People like with tons of garbage, and yet the dump is free. They don't even have enough volition to put the garbage at the dump. It's all up and down the side of the road. Those people are fillers. So Aurora made a video about like our future forward. Last year, she was quite sure we would all be incinerated because no one was making any effort. No one has any volition. And we would have just ended up like Tiamat in a Groundhog's Day, spinning through the last moment while the sun basically incinerated all of us, and we'd be spinning forever through this Groundhog's Day, like last moment of your experience, kind of like what happened in the Twin Towers. 3,000 people were stuck in a Groundhog's Day, spinning around, like going to the job and sitting at their desk every day, over and over and over. And that's called an unresolved dead consciousness, right? So we were on the precipice of that. And it's much because all of the boring sex people are also getting this, which is resonant. It's like a C string on a violin. If you're doing a G or a C or an A on a violin, the piano in the other room will resonate a G, C, or an A, all right? If you're doing D, it'll go D. So DNA is resonant. So that's why I was correct when I was exclusive. Because if you are resonating on the frequency of the people that took the satanic experiment, it will change you, even if you didn't take it. And that's why all the people who are contaminated now because they had sex with someone, this goes back into my boring sex, it's not so much because of the changes through reverse transcriptase that happened to their blueprint. It's because you were resonating with them. And that's how you got changed and now have brain fog and you cannot figure out what you're doing because you resonated with someone who would take that experiment. I did not resonate with people who would take that experiment. And I have a huge amount of empathy for the young people who do not know better or were forced to take that experiment by their parents. Now for them, I'm very forgiving for the young people. They are completely mind controlled. And many of them, scream their heads off when they're taken to the doctor's office. In my old videos, which are on BitChute now, my Vimeo's gone, I said, they gave us the oral polio. And even when I was a kid, I ran away. Like they gave us the oral polio. I held it in my mouth and spit it out in the toilet. So even as a third grader, I had the sense because I am in my own volition. I am a divine spark. I realize what's going on here and I can feel what's good and what's evil. I know the difference between good and evil. And that's why I did not, my children were not nothing, ever. And that was way back in the 1990s, I knew that. When I was 5 years old and I had to go get the ones before you go to school, I ran away. My father had to come and find me in a truck. I literally left the doctor's office and ran away and would not have those things. So I also have a lot of my own volition because I have not received monkey DNA. I have not received undifferentiated fetal cells and all the other unbelievable stuff that is in those satanic subcutaneous poisons. All right? That's why you don't have your volition. So I'm trying to free you of your fetal patterns, your boring sex, your mind control through sporting events and the television that you probably have on, even if you don't like your husband and he's in another room. It's broadcasting through the holographic universe. It's not only affecting your household, it's affecting Sirius. So I'm going to really stretch this out for you now today. Your second chakra is affecting the entire galaxy. And if you are making filler people, what a lot of people call non-source players, but they are not non-source players. They are, in fact, humans with souls that have no volition and no intelligence. 90% of humanity is like that. You're broadcasting through the galaxy, which is why we're quarantined. That's why we're quarantined. And as far as I can tell from our future, we're going to continue to be quarantined. So we're going to be continue to be quarantined. We will not be part of cosmic society because your orange chakra and whatever perversions or boring sex you have affects the entire galaxy. That's why we're quarantined. I mean, we're not alone in the galaxy, folks. I mean, this is what I said to my mother recently when I was able to really explain all this to her and how the WBAN is down now. But I still don't think I can visit her. And I don't talk to her that often because her, antenna vibrates my antenna. And so I always have to be in a really elevated, super high space, having done the flying rainbow lasagna, to even call my mom. Because I need to resonate like up here to bring her antenna up to me. I can't go down to her. So why we're going to be quarantined again is because we're perverts. I'm saying this straight out to y'all, folks. We're going to be quarantined again. So after this 25,920 year cycle, we will be quarantined for another 25,920 years, as far as I can tell from what Aurora is reporting, because we just are not putting ourselves together. Now, the good thing about that is we will have some self-determination. So it won't be like the Sumerians arrive and then, hybridize us again. But I'm going to be very strict. If I'm here and I'm not incinerated, I will be very strict as a consciousness. Let me tell you, I will be a police officer of the galaxy. So I want y'all to know, I have been completely terrorized online, and many of you know because you've searched me and see like hundreds, if not thousands, of videos of people who hate me. But also, like when I did the last call that I did with Nish at the Cosmic Salon, there were a bunch of people who literally hated me in word and deed and said that I was exclusive, that I was only allowing 10 people into my astrology class, that I was exclusive, and who was allowed to come to the retreat because I didn't want this. And my people who came to the retreat, these are very high level, absolute pristine people that are like careful about what they drink, what is in the water, that they had high quality food. They don't want to be with you if you've done this because it means your consciousness is like very low if you chose that. And yet, I never heard an apology from anybody who was broadcasting slander against me. Not one apology. So that's why I will not do any more radio shows, because now that energy of my intent to inform and explain what was being, asked of me, and then to be slandered, oh boy. Well, guess what? if I continue to make videos, there are going to be more and more taboo topics like this. So I'm not doing as many sessions anymore. And in fact, Claude and I are on day 7 of our parasite cleanse right now. And I'm getting wilder and wilder. So as our sun is becoming like a laser, getting ready for this major solar flash, what I understand is the whole grid will be down, and it has to be down. We cannot have 6G. We'll all be dead if 6G turns on. And I don't have the powers that I used to have. Like, I used to be able to see star Merkabahs like crazy. And now when I'm dancing lasagna, I have to really tune in to even see the color emanation and the numerics that Aurora is explaining. It's really hard, and it's because of the towers and the satellites. It's interfering with my otherwise very capable third eye that I used to have. Before 2019, I was advocating for we've got to take down the grid, because the other thing is you will not have telepathy as long as you're using your phone. That phone is what ruins your ability to connect through the love tone to your loved ones. Like, my family doesn't even write me letters anymore. I write letters and connect through the love tone rather than text someone or call them. I'll send them like little presents and little love notes and letters, and I will connect to them through the love tone. Before cell phones, my daughters and I were 100% telepathic. So the other reason the grid has to go down, and it will, so you better be prepared. The grid has to go down because it's inhibiting even further you returning to your full human ability. And the technology is all a copy of your full human ability. Like, me making this video for you right now should be able to do through basically like brain to brain osmosis. Like, I should not have to make a video for you, go to the library and upload it and then put it on YouTube. And the other thing I want to tell you is that, okay, now I'm going to get into some really esoteric stuff. I'm in some kind of class that I don't understand. I have been put into some kind of class in dream time. I'll explain it a little bit. I'm in some kind of class right now when I'm asleep. And one of the things that came through, I guess it was before I went to Payne's Prairie and saw the wild horses. I was asleep and I woke up and I held this thread that we used to be made of azurite. And I woke up and I said to Claude, so I could remember, Claude, I'm in some kind of class when I'm sleeping. I don't know what class. It's like some university in dream time. And I said, we used to be made of azurite. And so when I went to Payne's Prairie and then Micanopy after, I looked for the actual gem called azurite, and it's a blue-green gem. And I looked up, like, what is it made out of? It's a copper-based carbon, blue-green. And it like came through me that we used to be photosynthesis beings, and that's why there was like the green Tara or blue Krishna, is that was an aspect of us back when we were photosynthesis beings millions of years ago here on some version of Earth. There are many, 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 many Earths, okay, depending on what timeline you're on. It's the many worlds theory that I used to write about in my blogs before my website was taken down. So an azurite was one of our levels of incarnation when we were copper-based. Super interesting stuff like that is happening to me at night. And that's part of this 25,920 year cycle where some of us will graduate. And last year, Aurora was like, no one's going to graduate. You're all going to be incinerated. And this year, she thinks there will be some graduates. For me, my thing is, if I'm not harmonically correct to be part of the universe, that's why I was ready to just put myself in the void. I don't want to be a cyborg. I don't want to be whatever they're trying to make us into, gray aliens that are in a hive mind in the coffin of conformity. And the metaverse has been taken down. So maybe some people that have already passed are on that timeline, and they'll get the whole like revelations and uploaded into the artificial prison in 5D. But this timeline that you and I are on has potential. You have potential, but you have to make effort. All right. It's not like a Messiah program. Don't think that everything's fixed. You have to make effort. If you're in some like higher level divine university, like in Dreamtime, like I am now, you might be on part of like a graduation class. And I think there will be very, very few of us. So that whole like, you know, that creepy guy Bashar, like, oh my gosh, like what, I didn't even like to say that word, like that, those creepy fake ascension gurus. That's why you are all so put off by the new age, because other than Aurora, as far as I can tell, they're all creepy fake ascension gurus, all of them, which is why we're all like, well, I don't want anything to do with that, like, you know, Oreo cookie, like 5D people, kumbaya shit, where everyone's ascending. No, the perverts down the road that have a yard full of garbage with rapist dogs are not ascending. Okay, it's very, very few. It's the path of least likelihood. So you have to effort. You have to effort. All right. So that was my video on boring sex. If you were created from boring sex, you probably need to release, delete, eliminate, make free any of the ancestral patterns, the fetal imprints, the astrological chart that was created from that boring sex. And then maybe you have a little bit more volition and free will of your own. Okay, loves. Thank you. That was a long video. Bye-bye for now.